Welcome to the Olive Grove podcast. Today, we're diving deep into a book that really grapples with one of life's biggest questions. What's the point? What's our purpose?
Exactly. And we're looking at it through the lens of Ecclesiastes, specifically drawing from the MCS Ecclesiastes study.
Yeah, and we get to learn from someone who, well, you'd think had everything figured out because he had everything, period. King Solomon.
Mm-hmm. The book calls him Kohile. It means something like teacher or gatherer, maybe philosopher. And this is Solomon, King David's son, the one who built the temple in Jerusalem. He's writing this, it seems, looking back near the end of his life.
And that temple itself is quite a story, isn't it? God had promised David his son would build it.
Right, because David, having shed blood in wars, wasn't permitted to build God's house himself.
So Solomon steps in, and early on, there's that famous moment in Gibeon. He prays not for riches, but for wisdom.
Yeah, and God was pleased with that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
pleased that he gave him not just incredible wisdom, but also, immense wealth and honor. People came from all over just to hear him.
But it wasn't a perfect reign. The Bible tells us he disobeyed God, especially by marrying many foreign women who led his heart astray.
That's a key part of his story. And God warned him, didn't he? That because of this, the kingdom would eventually be torn away from his son.
A really stark reminder, even the wisest person imaginable can make huge mistakes.
Absolutely. And he reigned for 40 years. That number 40 often pops up in the Bible representing a period of trial or testing.
So you have this incredibly blessed, wise, yet flawed king, and he writes two very different books in a way. Proverbs is full of his practical wisdom.
And then there's Ecclesiastes, which feels like him looking back on all his striving, even his foolishness perhaps, and questioning its ultimate meaning.
It's a huge contrast. He's not some armchair philosopher. He lived it. Power, pleasure, building projects, wisdom, he had it all.
And that makes his starting point in Ecclesiastes just shocking.
It really is. Chapter 1, verse 2, he just comes right out with, pointless, pointless, says Kohile. Utterly meaningless, nothing matters. Or some translations say vanity of vanities.
Wow. Yeah, imagine achieving everything you could dream of, and that's your conclusion. It really shakes things up.
And right after that, in verse 3, he asks this fundamental question, what does a person gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun?
And think about who's asking. The guy who built the temple, one of the wonders of the ancient world. He's questioning the value of even that kind of labor.
He seems to be saying that all the effort we pour into earthly things, it's temporary, it doesn't last.
Yeah. It fades, it gets replaced. He sees this transience.
Then he looks at nature, verses 4 through 7. Generations pass, but the earth remains. The sun rises, sets, goes back. The wind blows south, then north in cycles. Rivers flow to the sea, but the sea's never full.
It's quite poetic. He's observing these huge, constant cycles that just happen without any human effort at all.
Right. And the study points out, this is before we had the scientific explanations, he saw this incredible self-sustaining system.
And saw it perhaps as pointing to God's hand continuously upholding creation. We don't make the sunrise, do we?
No. And this observation about the natural world seems to lead him to think about us, about humans, in verse 8. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing.
That feeling of dissatisfaction, that constant itch. We always want more, see more, hear more. It never seems to be enough.
So relevant today, isn't it? The next phone, the next trend, the next experience, always chasing.
He really nailed that human condition.
Yeah.
Which brings us to verses 9 and 10, and this is a tricky one for modern ears.
What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, and you think, wait a minute, what about my smartphone? What about space travel? That seems pretty new.
Oh, right. It feels contradictory.
But the study brings in this concept of El Elyon, God Most High. This name for God emphasizes his supreme sovereignty, his role as the ultimate creator and designer.
Okay, so the idea is
Maybe that even our new inventions are just reconfigurations or discoveries of principles God already embedded in creation. Like the potential was always there, part of his design. We're just figuring it out.
that's a humbling thought, puts our innovations in a different light.
It does. Then in verse 11, he hits on memory, or rather the lack of it. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow.
Oof. That's tough for anyone wanting to leave a legacy, build a name for themselves.
It really is. He seems to imply that the only legacy that truly endures is one connected to God, remembering his works, sharing his story. Human achievements, they fade from memory eventually.
He then talks about himself again, verses 12 and 13. As king, using his God-given wisdom, he set his heart to study everything done under heaven.
And listen to how he describes it. A heavy burden God has laid on mankind. Investigating life, trying to understand it all, he calls it a bothersome task.
It suggests that just human intellect isn't enough, maybe? That you need something more like godly wisdom to really grasp the truth?
That seems to be the implication. Without God's perspective, the search itself can feel burdensome, maybe even futile.
Which leads right into his conclusion for this section, verses 14 and 15. He's looked at all the activities under the sun, and what does he find?
Pointless. Feeding on wind? That's the phrase. Like trying to grab hold of the air. It's an illusion, especially compared to pursuing things with eternal value.
He even applied this to wisdom itself. Verses 16 and 17, he explored wisdom and knowledge, but also madness and folly.
And his conclusion, even pursuing wisdom in a purely earthly sense, felt like feeding on wind. This from the wisest man.
It sets up that really challenging statement in verse 18.
Oh yeah, for in much wisdom is much grief, the more knowledge, the more suffering.
That just sounds backward, doesn't it? We usually think knowledge is power, knowledge solves problems.
Well, the study suggests he's talking about earthly wisdom here, knowledge gained apart from God's perspective.
Okay. So the more you understand how broken the world is, how things should be, but aren't.
The more grief you feel, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you feel powerless to fix it. You see the injustice, the suffering, and it hurts.
Whereas godly wisdom brings a different kind of understanding, maybe peace, even amidst the brokenness.
Exactly. An understanding that God is ultimately in control and will bring restoration. It's a different kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
Leading to a different outcome.
Wow. Okay, there's so much to unpack there. We need to take a quick pause, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to continue this deep dive into Ecclesiastes. And we're back on the Olive Grove podcast. Before we jump back into Solomon's journey, we wanted to share something that feels connected to this idea of finding real purpose beyond just, earthly striving.
Yeah, it's about putting faith into action.
Yeah.
There's this really compelling book called Misfits for Jesus, true accounts of people experiencing Jesus.
You can find it on Amazon. It's just packed with these incredible true stories about how God is working, often in really miraculous ways, through a ministry called Enduring Freedom Ministries, EFM for short.
These aren't just nice stories. They're powerful testimonies of real change and transformation in people's lives. It's very inspiring stuff.
And EFM is doing some really important work on the ground. One of their big goals right now, something they're actively working towards, is establishing a food pantry in Jerusalem, Israel.
Think about that, providing essential, practical help, food, for those facing hardship, right there in Jerusalem. It's about meeting real needs in a place with such deep spiritual significance.
So if our chat today about purpose and meaning resonates with you, or if you're maybe looking for a way to connect your faith with tangible action,
we'd really encourage you to check out Misfits for Jesus on Amazon. Read the stories and, learn more about Enduring Freedom Ministries.
Absolutely. And if you feel led, you can also find ways through their information to support that Jerusalem Food Pantry project. Honestly, every little bit helps make a difference in providing that vital support.
It ties back in a way. While Solomon wrestled with the emptiness he found in purely worldly pursuits, finding lasting purpose often involves exactly this kind of thing, looking beyond ourselves, contributing to something bigger, something that reflects God's heart.
Okay, so let's bring it back to Ecclesiastes and wrap up our thoughts for today. So, as we finish up this first look into Ecclesiastes and Solomon's, startling reflections, here's something for you to maybe chew on.
Yeah, takeaway thought.
Look at your own life. Where does your energy go? What are you chasing after? Thinking about Solomon, who literally had it all by worldly standards, what do you think actually provides that deep, lasting sense of purpose?
Versus just, fleeting satisfaction.
Exactly. What are the potential wins you might be chasing, like Solomon described? And are there perhaps more solid, more enduring things to anchor yourself to?
It's a profound question. And Ecclesiastes doesn't necessarily give easy answers, but it forces us to ask the right questions, doesn't it?
It really does. Well, if this deep dive got you thinking, we hope you'll subscribe to the Olive Grove podcast right here on YouTube. We'll be exploring more meaningful topics just like this one.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.